Right. Let's see who's there. Okay. All right. So we have our first guest. I know my guest is ready. Let me just send him a request.
All right, let's see. Thanks, guys. Waiting for a few more people. We can have some company. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, Google. Thank you for being here. Hi, Monday. Thanks for joining. So maybe I've sent the request to our guests. Maybe just for those of you who are here, if you can give me a heads up if you can hear me clearly. That would help. I struggled a bit with my earphones, so if you can give me a heads up that you're good and that you can hear me, I'd appreciate it. Perfect. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. So he's here and let me accept him. Accept. Yeah, I'm getting good. Good at this. I mean, it's it wasn't really kind to us when we started, so good to see us flowing smoothly a bit. Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Dr.
I'm well,
Nkomo. Thank
thanks.
you for joining us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for calling me out.
Yeah, please, man. You know what? So before we actually start with our conversation, firstly, I want to just thank everybody who's still joining. Obviously, people will join the conversation as we move along. But I just want to give a hint of what we're doing to people who perhaps are joining us for the first time or maybe come across
Hello.
this as
Please come
well.
again for the past 30 seconds. I lost you for 30 seconds.
Okay, is it better now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes, yes. Sorry, there was a call
Okay,
that was
good.
coming through. Then I had to, yeah.
So, I mean, my hashtag My Africa is not even something that was that had a long-term goal, to be honest with you. We started
Yeah.
this during May to celebrate Africa Month, and I just felt, you know what, there's so much I want to talk about and chat about with my friends about Africa, about our
Okay.
continent, and how about we just, engage here and just see what we can, inspire people about when it comes to our continent. But then I got requests from a few people saying we kind of need a little bit more, so go beyond Africa Month and try and get some few people. And I think, I mean, I've done similar platforms before with Millennial Dialogue on Africa and a number of others, but I felt maybe it would help if we draw it here so we can bring professionals and creatives and experts, if you like,
Yeah.
to this simple
Yeah.
platform, share with our audience. So it's been good to know that people actually receive it quite well and they appreciate it. And today it is a pleasure to have you. You're joining us all the way from Philadelphia in the US. Thank you for making time for us. I think it's midday on your side, right? Around 12 p.m.
Yeah, I know it's 12 midday. Yeah. Yeah, it's 12 midday today.
So,
Thanks so much for the time. Yeah.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, it's evening, so it's 6 p.m. And we don't have load shedding. Well, for now.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know how to
I
spell
want
that
to,
word anymore.
you know what? I think perhaps you should enjoy the nice life problems on your side when it comes to electricity. We
Yeah,
certainly don't
look, I
have
mean,
that
we've got
fortune.
we've got other sets of problems altogether. We might not really have, those are very, very basic, but there's other more complicated societal issues that we battle with every day. But
Yep.
recently, the ruling with the Supreme Court, Constitutional
Oh,
Court,
yeah.
so it was a lot of a mess altogether. So there's just too many things, gun violence, and it's we have got problems. They're all sitting in different departments. It's the same devil, though.
And the
Yeah.
shooting of black men. But we won't touch on that today. America, yeah, we still have an issue about that. How America and black men, you know, we still have a problem with how America is so gun-friendly when it comes to black men, but that's not the topic for today. As you mentioned, there's a lot of problems in this world, not just in Africa or in America, but it is what it is. I want to just jump into our conversation and introduce you a little bit to our people who have joined us so they can have some background of what you do, so that in case they have some questions, they may, as you talk, maybe just, put through some questions here that we can also ask. So you are an electronics engineer by training, an academic researcher by passion, and a data scientist and a social entrepreneur at heart. This is not the first time we speak. We sat on a panel in 2019 in South Africa, just before COVID, and we had an interesting discussion about, I think, this ICT, just in the release space, and trying to see how the church can catch up to the digital age or the digital demands of really how the world is moving so fast. But I'm also interested in how you, of course, you got your PhD. I saw some of the pictures, and that's how I got to know you on Facebook. You got your PhD in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Johannesburg. Yeah. And your research area is advanced wireless sensor networks and the Internet of Things. Your research also is at the intersection of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, with a strong focus in machine learning and deep learning at the edge of the Internet of Things network. I got it right?
Yeah.
So one of my friends, listen, I also need you to appreciate the fact that I rehearsed for some of these questions, because I'm a words person, and I figured I'm going to be speaking to somebody who's like a numbers person and like a techno person, which I'm not, right? But I do, for the benefit of people who've joined us, there's a few questions I also got from friends, and I wanted to treat this conversation as a very casual one, because as much as I'm a words person, artificial intelligence is in our face. I hear it all the time. I see it in the news. Just this week, there was a specialist being interviewed on e-news about it, technology and artificial intelligence in the future in Africa. So it's really here. I wouldn't say I know everything about it, but I want to give you the platform to explain to us what it's about, and hopefully by the end of this discussion, we would have had some understanding and at least place ourselves in terms of where things are globally. But before we get to that, I want you to tell us what inspired your field of career, because it's quite unique, I must say. Obviously, what was your first inspiration in terms of why you would go into that type of fraternity or industry?
Look, I think I was very much fortunate, because I happen to have a very good background in maths, science, and basically your general sciences, and I think growing up in the hood in Zimbabwe, in Tumbane, and Makwekwe, to be more specific to those that are listening, shout out to them. And you realize that we didn't generally have any form of guidance whatsoever. There was no one to guide you, to tell you these are the possibilities, these are the options that you have in the future and all, right? And I happen to have a very good circle of friends that I kind of like really stuck with in my formative years, teenage stage, which was a very, very fragile, stage in my life. And at that point, it so happened that I had a few, if I'd made the few wrong decisions at that point, my life wouldn't have turned out to be the way it is now, And it was at that time when my mother used to say to me, and I'll say it in my Ndebele language, He said to me, "Matuna mtanami, hlukana namantombazana." You can't even afford to buy them a single pant, Just focus on your school. And I'm like, this old woman is like really, really mean. But looking back, that was actually the turning point of my life. I started taking school more seriously. I started hanging around with the right people. And that was actually my turning point also, I used to be a bad boy growing up, teenage stage, you're hanging out with the wrong people and all. And I happened to hang around with the right people who happened to have a very strong inclination to sciences. And I was really good, but I was playing a lot, you know, and I happened to spend a lot of time with them, and they kind of like really shaped the way I actually took everything from there, you know. I went on to varsity and I did electronic engineering, which was by accident again. You know, I didn't even know what electronic engineering was really all about. I knew it was just about electronics, but it wasn't really something that if you were to ask me what an electronic engineer actually does, I would eloquently state or something, you know. And boom, most of my friends actually went to electronic engineering, you know. And initially I had chosen to do finance, you know, because I've got a brother who told me, look, you know, you might want to come into the financial field instead of the sciences field. That's where money is, you know. And I was very much tempted because I could see he was really flourishing in that area, you know. Then I was like, maybe should I do finance and everything? But I just ended up happening to be in electronic engineering, you know. And I really enjoyed my time in there. And I think it was until when I was in my 4th year, it was a 5-year program. In my 4th year, that's when I started really understanding what it was all about, you know, in its infancy state, you know. And I did, so that's when I went for industrial attachment, which is basically like your internship of some sort, where I started getting to, because school was not really much of a challenge, you know, to be honest. It wasn't much of, because we used to have a clique of friends and we used to study together, you know, such that it ended up making school easier for us. So for example, I was good in chemistry and physics. You know, there were guys who were like really good in maths. I was good in maths, but there were like guys who were like really good in maths. So we let the guys who are good in maths explain in simple terms what a concept means, you know. So we kept like a very tight, even up to today. These are guys that I talk to almost just about every day. You know, we've stayed together. Then from there, I just happened to, you know, came down to South Africa. I worked as an engineer, but the challenges that I met in my earlier years of my career really made me to rethink my future positioning in this whole industry, because, you know, as a black young man in South Africa, as a foreigner, I was not classified under less privileged because I'm not really from there, you know. So I thought about what could be my advantage here. Then I thought, let me further my studies. You know, if I further my studies, it might actually give me a better edge, you know. Then it happened, I did a master's in the same field also, but specializing mostly in robotics. And I was very much fortunate to actually to go to China. I spent that time actually in China. I did that with the boys in China, and all. It was like really actually a turning point in my life. But I think what I would like to state in all of those opportunities coming to me, they were not so much about, they were not given, you know. There were a combination of many things. Number one, I stayed in touch and in contact with a lot of my professors that used to teach me, and I stayed in touch with my friends that I was at school with, because one of my friends actually went to China, Liberty. He went to China, and because I used to talk to him, I was like, look, there's an opportunity for you to come over. So you might want to put your story together and your act together and come over. I'm like, sure. I grabbed the opportunity, you know. So the importance of networking, you know, I kept on actively networking and engaging with the people, my past lecturers, and basically staying abreast with the industry as to where it was going, you know. And I happened to then come back to South Africa. I spent a lot of time in industry working as an engineer. Then along the way, I really got frustrated again along the way, you know. I felt like I was stuck. I felt like I wasn't adding much value because things were just not going the way I wanted to go, you know. Then I was like, look, my default position is to study further, you know. I found myself doing a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering, specializing in Internet of Things, wireless sensor networks, and AI, you know. And the reason being that, and I think that was around 2012, 2013, 2014, you know, I knew where the future was going because I used to read a lot, you know. And my advantage of being in China also helped me understand that we are actually worlds apart, you know. So when I was there, my experience really was informed by, I remember the research group that I was in. The guys that were there were actually researching about that was a time when 3D TVs were coming into the space, right? You remember the 3D TVs, right? Now we've got 4K TVs. So when the 3Ds came, the guys that I was actually in the same research group, which were masters, were actually working on designing those chips, you know? Then I thought to myself, in Africa, at this age and at this stage, we don't even get involved in this kind of research, right? You know? That's where I actually discovered that we're actually somewhat lagging behind. So when I came back, I told myself, I'm going to study further, you know? And because I see where we are now and where the future is going, we will be left behind, you know? So that was actually my motivation of actually ended up getting to do a PhD, but most importantly in artificial intelligence, because I mean, in wireless sensor networks, Internet of Things, because things were moving to that direction to say, you know, jobs are being taken away by automation, you know, things are being made redundant and all together, you know, am I going to be relevant in the next 10, 15 years? You know, the kind of job that you're doing now in 10 years time, a much younger, smarter boy is actually going to be doing it, you know. So if you don't position yourself for that kind of change, you know, you would think something hit you and you think witchcraft is, you know, it just happened. But it's that lack of foresight, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a bit. I know I said a lot, but yeah, that's just my big background.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have stress about that. I think about it a lot in terms of what the future looks like in terms of technology and this entire automation issue, because you can see where it's headed, and a lot of people are advocating for it. I mean, this whole futuristic idea. Not everybody's clamping it down because it is coming. I mean, it has started. One of my moments, or rather my aha moments, was recently when my mom was in hospital and I went to see her, and there was this machine doing corridors. I mean, I've been hearing conversations. I watch the news and I've been listening. You know, I get it. But I think it hit me then that, by the way, this will be actually here, right? And how does this look? Because as it is now, we're talking about the future of work. Human resources are tackling the idea of work and how COVID changed just the idea of a workplace to this whole futuristic, idea of what's actually coming. But again, I want us to try by all means to have this conversation, put people at ease in terms of opportunities and I suppose challenges really. Even though we feel like a lot will be replaced, it is a fact we can't run away from. If anything, it's inspiration or should be inspiration to anybody. To, as you say, they should position themselves in a way that even though half of your job is being done by machines, at least you can still do something. But I'm interested again in terms of what you mentioned, in terms of where you did your master's in, I think it was, is it Shandong University of Science and Technology?
Shandong University of Science and Technology, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, before I get to my next question, I really wanted to get your essence in terms of where China is, in your view, in relation to Africa. People are talking about how it is the next best thing. In fact, it's already here. And, you know, back then, I asked this question because we've always seen the U.S. as the mighty powers, you know, the best and the almighty U.S. But it seems that China is giving them a run for their money. I'm interested in you regarding that, since you studied it.
There's a combination of, and thanks for bringing that, because this is actually something that, like, I think kind of like really informs my future, my current positioning, and where I actually feel like I want to be very much involved in the future, which is really Africa, right? Now, statistically, if you look at the population of the world, right, and the dynamics in terms of the distribution, in terms of the ages and all, right, now it is predicted that by the year 2030, you know, 40% of the world's most productive workforce is going to be Africa, and that's a fact. You know, why are we saying that? Because Africa has got a very youthful population, right? And because economists have actually picked this thing up, that's why now you will find that there is so much technology investment in Africa by the big companies. Ask yourself why. You know, this is not just charity work, it's an investment. Why? Because they know that at the end of it, though AIs and everything are gonna come, we're gonna automate things. You know, the bulk of the intelligence, you know, still resides with the, of course, we toss that between artificial general intelligence and a human being, you know, which is a very controversial issue at the moment. You will find that because we have got a youthful population and we have got a skill force that will be unmatched the world over, because Europe has got a very aging population, you know. The US has got also those kind of problems, and China has got the advantage that it has a youthful population, but there's a bulk of the aging population too, you know, which in essence, what that simple means is the investments that are coming to Africa is really trying to capacitate young Africans to still be able to work for the big companies. You know, that's why now it's more lucrative for young men to work for Google or Amazon in Africa than they would be for a startup that is actually in Africa. You see? And when you look at China, of course, they've got an advantage of population, right? And the very fact that they've actually invested a lot in their technology front, they are actually in the lead in my view. And if you look at where everything is actually what's actually happening now, you know, with the chip shortages, I don't know if you're aware that like now there's actually shortage of chips to make computers, you know, and devices and everything, you know, because of the whole Internet of Things, because everything now needs a computer chip, you know. Your TV needs more chips than anything else. Cars need more chips than ever before, you know. So I'm sure I don't know what phone you're using, but if you're using an iPhone, if you flip it on the other side, it's actually it says it's designed in California, but made in China. Now, what China has actually mastered, it has actually mastered the art of manufacturing, right? So their mass production regime has actually positioned them to be in the forefront of technology. Yes, still from an economic standpoint, they are still they are the second biggest economy, right? But it's not too far in the future that they would completely eclipse the US, you know, because the US is very much dependent. I don't know how much of the work that I actually still do now, and I send it to China for manufacturing, you know. So those are the kind of dynamics that we deal with at this stage, you know. So if you find yourself then as China investing so much in Africa, America investing so much in Africa, Europe investing so much in Africa, that means that they are seeing something that we as Africans are not seeing. They are trying to build the next big thing using the workforce in Africa, you know. So yeah, that's just how things are actually looking at the moment.
So that a leading player, a key role player in production, manufacturing, some of the sectors, in fact, in most places when I go speak at, relating to entrepreneurs, people are constantly pushed to get into manufacturing, into production, because, well, I suppose their perception that we, you know, produce and just, rather not produce, but we consume rather. We hardly produce. So it would be interesting to also see South Africa specifically, but of course, Africa as a whole getting into really just the habit of really being able to produce and manufacture stuff and can create something, because in terms of resources, I mean, look, I stand to be corrected, but I think we all know that we
very resource,
So, you know, we capacitated to do any of that.
Coltan in the DRC is actually what they use a lot for computer chips, you know, and you wonder why there's a war in those regions, you know. The war is not just, you know. So those are the kind of dynamics that, I mean, like, you get toothpicks made in China, you know, and we still can't make toothpicks, you know. So it actually speaks to a very, very diverse problem altogether, you know. I mean, over 40 years since the manufacture of the first transistor, Africa still doesn't have a single company that actually manufactures silicon, you know. And then you think we're going to be the leaders in technology. We can't, you know, because we are not in the forefront of that research. You know, that's why for me, research is something that's very, very close to my heart. Because what we do is we go to school, get good grades, and then dump whatever we've done, and then start working. Failing to understand that what you are doing at school, you are actually learning a skill and a trade. Take your thesis, take your research, transform it into a product in the market. Most people talk about people like Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg being college dropouts, then they become billionaires. They were working on something big, that's why they dropped out. To get my point, you know? And and this whole narrative of dropout has been really blown out of proportion because people don't understand the narrative behind why they actually dropped out. Because they took what they were working on at school. They were not just doing it for grades. They were doing it to transform a certain industry. Look at how reliant we are on Facebook. I mean, we're reliant. It did not be Mark Zuckerberg who wouldn't be talking on this platform. Because Instagram is owned by Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah.
Certainly the greatest takeover, really. I wanted to go back a little bit to your academia phase. And I wanted to be realistic about the challenges in academia because I'm thinking of a young person who could be listening or who come across this and think, okay, great, so I would like to get into this field as well, but there isn't enough funding for me to study as far as you did, despite my interest. I'm interested to know how you navigated your, I suppose, funding or being able to, really get through your master's to go to China, post-master's, and really get to do your PhD. Because, I mean, there's Black people, circumstances of an ordinary Black person, a degree is the furthest you can go because, that's how far you could push maybe from a family, that's how far they could help you. Beyond that, it's quite a struggle. What happens to someone with that interest? How did you navigate that whole funding idea to study higher to that level?
For me, it was a combination of a couple of things, right? And I think it happened in stages. Obviously from my undergrad, I really spent hours myself. I had brothers who could help me, and I had a mother who really bent herself out on almost just about anything, just to really send me out to school. Which was really unheard of. I think my mother, when I think about it now. My mother passed away just a week before I wrote my final year exams at college, And if I think about that whole dynamic now to then say, okay, you get helped and assisted and also I have a very good, family background. I mean, like, my uncles were very much involved in our upbringing. I didn't grow up with my father, but I am quite close to my father's side of the family. All those dynamics, right? And if I think about all of those situations, right, I could have given an excuse not to go to school and not to even study further. And I remember when I finished my Form 4. And I said to my mother, I passed. I need to continue doing my studies. And she looked at my results and she said, so how do you know that you passed when it's like this? She couldn't even understand my results. It's only when, other mothers in my neighborhood came and congratulated and said, yes, umdanako. He did, very well and everything else like really the best in my hood. So it was a big deal. To have someone with the number of A's that I had, it was kind of like unheard of, type thing, And when it comes to undergrad, it was really, 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 really difficult. I think I came to a point at some point, I mean, in my journey where I almost quit. In my third year, I said to myself, I'm quitting, right? I quit and I came to South Africa, right? But that was the time when I was actually supposed to go for internship, right? Yeah. Because the situation was unbearable, fees and everything and life in general. Zimbabwe's economy was collapsing. And when I came to South Africa, I just happened to get an opportunity as an intern in my field, then that kind of like was a turning point. And there's a long story to how I actually even got there. I remember, my brother was staying in Berea, in Joburg, and I walked from Berea to Kyalami, dropping CVs in companies along the way, from there, Melrose, Woodmead. I was literally going into companies that I saw on the road, and I was just dropping CVs. By the end of the day, the first day, I got a lot of calls, say, hey, what, come, let's talk. And I got an internship. And that was actually the turning point for me, And I think what I would like to emphasize there is, there is a lot of people who look at their situations and companies are very much willing to assist, It is because we think that they haven't put out an advert there, then there's no internships and everything, you know. I literally went in unsolicited, you know, dropped my CV in their front desk, say, look, even if you don't have a position, you might want to look at my CV, you know. And the person who actually hired me looked at my CV. He didn't even have a position. He created an opportunity, a position for me. He took my CV, he went to his boss and said, there's no way we're letting this boy go. Let's make a plan. I need this kind of person. I will mentor him. I will tutor him. I will, you know, and there's a guy called, he was a Spaniard guy. You know, he really changed my life as far as my career is concerned. Up to today, we're still very much in touch. We've even done some work even after that. So those kind of challenges. And I think for me, I really looked at my situation, and I stopped feeling sorry for myself. You know, I would go onto websites, look at their conditions and everything. I never qualified for all of them, you know. But what did I do? I had to physically go and step into each and every company. And remember, companies get incentivized. If you didn't know that in South Africa, companies get incentivized. For every R1 they spend, they get R150 back in returns, you know. So for all the young people out there, go to a company unsolicited. Just go. You know, I mean, for me, it actually worked that way. And I don't know of any situation that I can actually say, go to this website, this and that. You know, because in many cases we always start feeling sorry for ourselves. They're not responding to thingy. At times, just show up. You know, I used to just show up without any appointment. You know, I'll get to their front desk and they'll ask me, do you have an appointment? No, I don't have an appointment. Who are you here to see? Can I see someone who is in the technical services? I just want them to look at my CV. And I never even used to go to HR, because HR will start looking at my CV differently. I would ask for someone in technical. When they look at my CV, they're like, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly my point. Then those people in technical had to argue my case at HR, you know. And from there, I managed to get an internship from the money that I got from my internship, and I managed to finish paying for my varsity studies. I don't even owe a cent. And fortunately now for my master's also, I got my tuition paid because I really kind of like reached out, and there was an opportunity, and I managed to get that out, you know. But also, more importantly, for my master's, what I actually did was, I had a very good industry paying job, you know, and there was an opportunity to do a master's. So I had to make a very hard decision of saying, do I quit my job? And because this is actually where a lot of people are actually struggling. Do I quit my job and go and study full time? You know? And I said to myself, look, I might as well quit my job and go and study full time. And I did that, you know, and it actually worked well for me, you know, because when I came back from there, the salary that I was getting previously was actually doubled, if not tripled, you know, because of that sabbatical that I took to go to study, you know. So funding still remains a big issue, you know. But I can tell you right now, go to as many networking events as possible. Go to as many companies, unsolicited as many as you can. You know, you'll be surprised at what you actually can get. You know, because companies do have schemes of that nature, and they could always help.
Yeah, I think that's what I pick up from what you're saying quite a lot. It's just reaching out. I reached out, constantly knocking on doors, and I think that's one element that people can't take away from you, really, because sometimes at some point you've got to be that bold and that brave to really knock on the door of your future. I do want to read something here from, I think some of the people watching, it's Antiani, who says, I like the fact that your situation didn't stop you from reaching your goals. As hard as it was, you kept focused and stayed away from bad things like drugs. Inspiring.
Yeah, no, so I think that helped.
Yeah, focus, and I suppose intention and a sense of determination, or clear-headedness in terms of this is who I am and this is what I want. Of course, it's not. I don't have it right now, but hey, you know what? I'm gonna try my best to get it. I want you to take us through how we can improve IT, just technology, basically the ICT sector in Africa, but mostly conscious in our community. Really not where I personally would like us to be. I spoke at a school in the concept about 2 weeks ago. Very, very beautiful school, fairly new. And you can see that they're trying to do something there, a few computers here and there.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's just like a lucky one, really. Most of the schools
yeah,
that we even, I mean, it's not, there's hardly a computer. And we're talking about this futuristic ideology that's coming, that's really on its way. And we have all these young people who, as you
yeah.
know, everybody's got eyes on Africa because it's got the youngest population. But how are we capacitating young people in this particular field? Because we need all these resources. What do you think? What are some ideas you've got, especially because you are a founder of these SMEs that are trying in terms of technology? What are your ideas in terms of what Black communities in particular can do for them to at least step up to some level of a global competitiveness in the technology space?
Yeah, and I think thanks for raising that point. I think in the past few years, we have been involved. That's why I think my career has always been intricately tied to the to academia. You know, like from the time I left academia, I didn't completely dissociate myself with it. You know, because I feel like there's so much that comes from academia that if it's twined with what's happening in the community, we can at least harness those forces and at least get something out of it. And I mean, just to go back to your sentiments, the biggest challenge that we're always going to have is we don't have, there isn't much resources, which is actually a more complicated problem altogether, right? But I feel like one thing that we're actually missing out is this. Now, in our phones, in our pockets now, we carry devices with far more computing capacity than there was in the first rocket that took men first to the moon. Just from your phone, as is now. You know, I mean, like if you look at the mobile penetration rate of Africa now, it's nearly close to 1:1. You know, almost just about every young person has got a phone, right? And because of that, you will start realizing that we are using our phones to generate content for other people. You know, like there's whole bars of content creation, you know, this whole thing of you know, like being influencers, this and that. 10 years ago, there was no job called an influencer. Right now, it's actually a big thing, you know, because brands actually moving over to this whole digital strategy informed about the ubiquity of mobile devices that are in people's hands, because from there you can generate content, right? And now, because we've got this kind of computing capacity, most people don't realize that from your phone, you can actually learn programming from your phone. There's a lot of websites that you can actually use and a lot of platforms that you can actually use from your phone, and you can actually learn computing. You know, I'll tell you one routine that I actually have that actually helped me cover a lot of ground in the past 4 or 5 years. You know, I discovered that I lose sleep between 7 and 8 in the morning. You know, don't ask me why I'm sleeping at 7, 8. Like that's the time I don't wake up. I'm not a morning person, you know. I'm a guy who would sleep at 5 in the morning and wake up at 10, you know.
Yeah, you start to text in the AM.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. I slept at 4 a.m. I woke up now at 10, you know. So because of that, I've realized that whenever I lose sleep, I just get onto my phone and I start doing a course online on Coursera. There's this platform called Coursera. There's Data Camp. There's Khan Academy. There's a lot of them. You can actually learn programming from there, you know, just by registering, you know, and even you can even get a certification out of it, you know, pay $29 per month and everything, because a lot of young people spend so much money in other things, but they don't want to invest in themselves first, you know. So there's the component of you betting on yourself first as a person, you know, and then there's an element of handouts, you know. So we're sitting with a group of disgruntled young people looking for handouts in this space, you know, and you are carrying a phone, you know. I mean, like you see someone crying for an iPhone or a Samsung, what, but the only thing that they're thinking about is content creation. They're not thinking about advancing their schooling using that device, you know. There's a lot of apps that can teach programming, you know. I mean, my son at 2, I was shocked that he can actually play a flight simulator on his own, self-taught, you know. And I'm thinking, this guy, and those are the kind of things now when I'm thinking now that these are the devices that we actually have, but we don't fully utilize them, you know.
Yeah.
So in as much as we're undercapacitated, we've got so much computing in our pockets, and we don't actually get to use them. And I mean, I can post a couple of websites, but Coursera is actually one website that you can actually go to and learn programming. Data Camp is actually my best. I go to Data Camp almost every day. You know, you can learn a lot of program, and some of the courses are actually free. You know, and by so doing, we're able then to cover up this gap that is a need for computing. Because next thing that you're thinking about, I need a computer. How much is a computer? A good computer will cost you 30,000. You know, well, at least in my world, you know, it will actually cost you that much. And you think about, I don't have that kind of money. I don't have money, someone to send me to school, you know. Universities now are decentralized. You might not need to fully go into university yourself, you know, but you can actually do a full-blown online master's in computer science, in AI, in electronic engineering. Those certain components you might not understand because they need lab work and everything. But now with the whole thing of the metaverse coming in, you can actually even learn experiments in the metaverse, you know. So these are all the advances that are actually coming in, and we're not fully utilizing all of these things, you know. And I would say my charge to almost just about anyone who is struggling with the resources, as long as you've got a phone, you know, determination is your only limit.
Yeah.
As long as you've got a phone, determination and discipline also. And I think this is one thing that I always struggle with a lot of people, to say, look, they've got this ideal life, you know, but they don't understand that for you to get to that kind of life, you might have to be in crooked paths for a very long time, you know, and find yourself in that crooked path. And when you are in that state, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You know, I'm one person. I have stopped feeling sorry for myself, you know, and those were actually the transformative years of my life, you know, and I started taking things, you know, very personal as it were. And things changed.
Yeah. I must say, I like the idea of what you said about bet on yourself. I think that's so powerful. That's it's a game changer. Bet on yourself. And I think on I even tweeted something like, you know, if there's one person you should believe in, that's yourself. Maybe you want to start there, because a lot of stuff aligns after that. I want us to quickly go through this comment. I think it's Boyle Porto, who says, one of the most focused, he is one of the most focused and hardworking gentlemen I've met. Your determination is motivating. There's also one from Google who said, it's insightful. Entitlement is a pandemic. Amen to that. Entitlement is a pandemic behind most South Africa's high graduate unemployment. Young people must accept that no one owes anyone a job. We've got to think about what value we've got to offer. And I think in this light, I want to just briefly, I mean, I know you are so passionate and I know you have a lot to say, but looking at the time, I cannot let you go until you tell us a little bit about what you do. You know, I know some things may not be up for mention, but I want you to tell us about the research work you do with the most amazing major global companies that you can only dream of, including one I visited in 2019, NASA. And also tell us about what you did in the UN. Recently, you were at the UN. You know, what's your job like? What's a day in an office like of a techno-savvy human like you at that level?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, you know, I think as early as Form 1, Form 2, and I think that was around 18, 19 years old, right? I used to have this book about Russian cosmonauts, right? A cosmonaut is an astronaut, right? And most of my friends used to think I'm crazy, really, really crazy. And I think most people who grew up with me know my kind of insanity around space travel, space exploration, and everything. And you know, I'm a dreamer. Like, everyone who has actually interacted with me, you know, I talk a lot of things that are somewhat abstract. And if you're not, you know, familiar with that kind of thing, I can be really annoying that thing. Whereby I can literally be talking about something that if you look at it, it might not really be not happening now, but I will chase it up until it gets there, you know. I remember at some point, I used to tell people that at some point, you know, it might not be me in my generation, but at some point as Africa, we need to be very much involved and active in the space program, you know. And this is something that I've actually studied, that I couldn't do it mainstream, you know. I remember at some point, for me, that was 2010, 2011, you know. I used to look at this whole NASA program, you know, and there was this one strange requirement to say, you need to be a US citizen. You need to be a US citizen. And I'm thinking, okay, so it means I can never be, or your country needs to be participating in the space program, you know. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is never going to be, I'll never set a foot at NASA, not even on a single day, you know. But I said to myself, you know what, let me write an email. You know, I went over to the NASA website. I looked at most of their research center, AIMS, you know, Houston Mission Control, Goddard Space Center. There's like a lot of space centers that I looked at. I started looking at their emails from there, took their emails, I started emailing them. Unsolicited, you know, telling them about my passion about the space program and everything. And I would email them continuously. You know, and some would respond, you know. And because they would respond, I started gaining a little bit of, you know, trust. You know, maybe one day I'll make it. Maybe one day I'll make it. I'll get there, you know. And I remember it was 2019. 2019, they had this postdoctoral program where they were looking for researchers, you know, from almost just anywhere in the world, you know. And fortunate enough, and this is the one thing that I would like to emphasize, say, especially if you still haven't gotten where you want to be, keep studying, you know. And the real work happens when no one is watching, you know. Keep studying. And I kept on studying, hoping that one day, you know. And I saw this whole research, you know, they were talking about all this stuff in mobile sensor network, Internet of Things, AI. And I'm like, this is actually my field, you know. And I reached out to a couple of guys, you know, applied to the program and everything. Fine, because of other complexities around citizenship, I still couldn't get into the program. But I had the privilege of then doing some work that is directly involved in that whole space, you know. Some of the stuff, unfortunately, because of the, you know, complexities around, you know, the high profile, you know, NASA things, whatever, I never get to, you know, these are kind of things that you know. And recently, I mean, with the research that I actually do now, I've got a team of like researchers that actually you know, guide through, you know, show them, okay, this is actually what you could be doing, you know, stuff like that. And one of the stuff that we do is, of course, in the FAA, you know, we work with you know, drones and, you know, kind of stuff and all. But also most importantly, my day revolves around really building capacity for African young startups, because my company, Hela, which is the company I founded a couple of years ago, we started off in the whole e-hailing industry. And when the pandemic happened, we pivoted over to be a full-blown technology consultants company. So we built products for people, we built products for other companies, and I actually teamed up with this is actually one point that I actually forgot about, you know, to say, in my journey, I've actually managed to do a lot of things because I've stayed in touch with my peers, you know. Most of the stuff that I actually get to do now, you might think I'm the one who's doing everything, you know, but it's because of the team around me, you know. I discovered I know my strengths, you know, in the technical space, you know, but there are guys who are actually even more clever, you know. Then what I do is I leverage on their experiences. I mean, look at a company like Facebook. Facebook was not done by Mark Zuckerberg only. It was Mark Zuckerberg, Dustin Markovitz, Mark Hughes, and every, you know, and all those people. Google, Larry Page, Sergey Brin. So the ability to network within your peers is really important, because if you can't convince your peers that you have got the next big thing that you're building, forget that you're going to convince an investor who doesn't know you, you know. So you need to be able to convince your friends. If your friends don't believe you, don't think someone seated out there in government would convince them to actually fund you, you know.
Yeah.
So because of this network effect amongst your peers, you know, I mean, how many young people meet every weekend to do other activities, not directly related to building businesses, you know? Our Oliver Tambos met over the weekends to discuss the future of young people. How many of us young people are sitting every weekend to discuss the future of our young people? Most of the times when we are meeting as young people, we're discussing the future of, you know, white people by spending on their businesses, you know, what you consume and everything, you know, stuff like that. So until we start really bringing in a lot of self-introspection as far as how your time is consumed, you know, you never really start to be relevant in the future where we're going, you know, because the bulk of us really think that technology is there to just make our life easy and everything, you know. It will come in, but it will augment some of the kind of stuff that we're actually doing, you know. And for example, things like tellers in the shops, you know, like here in the US, you can walk into a shop, you know, like in New York here on 32nd, in New York, you know, in New York, there's an Amazon store, you know, there's no one in there. You just walk in, you pick up what you want and you go out, you know, you know. So this is the kind of automation that is actually there, you know. So what happens when that kind of situation comes into South Africa? It comes into a company like ShopRite, Pick and Pay, you know, all of those people. Petrol attendants, there's no petrol, you know, the US, there's no petrol attendants. You pour your own fuel, you know. So those are the people that should have been put into other sectors. But because our capacity building has got so much structural challenges, you know, we never get to fully deploy people in all of these spaces, you know. And I wish and I hope that we as young people could actually start understanding the power of the computing capabilities that we have in those so-called iPhones, so Samsungs. And the reason why Facebook is the biggest company now is because you spend 8 hours a day on Facebook and on Instagram. That's why it's that big, you know? And we don't realize that. Yes, you might be making a little bit of money if you're an influencer, right? You know, but the bulk of us are not influencers. I mean, I'm not an influencer, you know? So you need to start understanding where, as Africans, we need to position ourselves, you know? And I spend so much time now really trying to build capacity for young people in universities, you know, finding jobs. I find jobs here in the US in the technology space. And I send it back to my boys in Johannesburg. You know, I've got a team of guys in Johannesburg say, hey guys, we've got a project here and everything. That's where I build capacity for Africa, you know. In the next 5-10 years, my goal is to have at least 5,000 technology developers on my platform, you know, that can actually outsource and do all the work for all of these big companies, you see. So those are the kind of dynamics that I feel like every young person, you know, your friends, look at your friends. If your friends is all for vibes over the weekend, I can assure you now you're hanging around with the wrong friends, you know. Even if you don't like it, you are just hanging around with the wrong friends, you know. And if you head now, you're going to be a statistic at some point.
Yeah, something that unfortunately don't want to hear, but we have spelling evidence of that pretty much everywhere, really. But I think I like the idea of how you capacitate other professionals, younger professionals, or emerging professionals back home. And my next question was to say, maybe as we close, because in fact, you actually comment now and says, listen, this is all good, right? This automation business, but please don't introduce it here in South Africa because we're still marching for jobs, especially post-COVID.
Yeah.
You know, pretty much just one job.
The
But
US has got a surplus of 4 million jobs at the moment.
Yeah.
Surplus.
Yeah. I think, I mean, COVID didn't make it easy. We were already sitting on a ticking time bomb, and now it's probably worse after the past 24 months. But I do want us to be honest about how the future looks like as well. And I suppose conversations like this can at least start, give us a precursor of how that looks like. So you can, I guess, get that edge as a professional in trying to push yourself towards, I suppose, an advantage, as you said, when you started. to say that you may not stop certain things. So how do you then position yourself to be in the best, in the most, in the best possible way, so that even if it does happen and it does come, you're not completely wiped out. Like the interview I was watching recently now on TV, somebody was saying, it seems like we cannot stop it. That's how the future looks like. But how can we get to the point of accepting that, okay, fine, if at least I do 80% of my job and the machine does 20, maybe I can live with that. Not the machine doing 60% of my job and I do 30% because then there's a problem. So I suppose also Africa, the African market must also think quite hard about they must just think hard about how we can position ourselves globally and be able to introduce it or embrace it in a way that doesn't, wipe us out. I don't know. It's something we're all looking at, but it's inspiring to when you talk about it from a knowledge point of view. And there's a question that I feel is important because this person is asking from a point of wanting to understand in terms of qualifications. They're asking, do you think the workplace is ready to accept, I think it's not quite clear, to accept academy as compared to this graduates? Okay, I think.
This is actually a very interesting point. I don't mind staying behind for this, because this is like very, very important. And I think maybe I'll add on to your closing, your remarks prior to this question. Coursera, right? Udemy, DataCamp and all of these platforms, right? They are there to actually accelerate the gap between graduate and usefulness in industry. And this is a very delicate issue because a lot of companies now started to hire graduates for one simple reason, that they are not employable, they are not productive enough. It takes about 2 years for a graduate to be profitable for any business. So companies don't have enough capacity to actually train you for 2 years, then you leave. So they want you to come in and you're already productive, right? So by taking courses on Coursera, and these are more product specific. So let's say, for example, let me talk a field that I'm quite close to, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, IoT, wireless sensor networks, you name it, If you have got a very strong background in mathematics, maybe you say you did a BSc in computer science, math, engineering, mechanical engineering, and all of the disciplines in the STEM field, right? You are in a better position to go on Coursera and study a course in machine learning or in computational neuroscience, and that kind of like closes your gap and your usefulness in industry. So that's why you see companies might not want to hire a graduate straight. They'll need 5 years experience. Why? Because there's that funding gap that they need to train in there, and they don't have that kind of leverage. Banks don't have. No one literally has got that kind of thing. So that's where most of these courses come in. So at times to sit in and just do those courses again, knowing how structural our system is, it will always be difficult to actually convince them. Have your first degree, but on top of that, also augment that with some of these product-specific technologies. For example, if you look at AWS and Google Cloud Platform, which is actually one of the leading cloud platform providers out there in the world, right? So you can actually go and take an AWS course or a GCP course, right, on Coursera, right, and use that course to learn. But because you've got the fundamental understanding of what cloud computing is, you don't have the practical experience of it. So you actually help yourself learn through those platforms. So it's there to find that gap between graduate and usefulness in industry, And to go back to your remarks that had to, when you're talking about, how then do we as young people, find ourselves relevant in the future, and how do we position ourselves, right? We need to start creating jobs for ourselves, right? And how do we do this? We know, let me take for example, we know that 3D printing is actually the future, right? Where you can actually, now at UJ, There's a friend of mine who is actually doing his PhD in civil engineering, right? It did a robotic arm, a robotic system that can print a house in 3D. Instead of humans building a house, you can actually print a house, like as if you're using a printer, it actually prints in 3D. Because of that, we're simply saying, if you know that 3D is the future, right? What do? Team up with your friends and start learning how to service these machines that are going up doing the printing. Form a company that will be specializing in servicing these machines. Because there's going to be a lot of robotics, but who's going to service those robotics? Robotic systems, because they're mechanical systems. There's wear and tear.
I actually wanted to ask about that. To what extent, but I guess you probably won't stop, but I needed to ask about that aspect of to what extent does a human element impact or is needed for robotics
in the future?
Is it byproduct? How will it work? I'm still quite fascinated to see this.
We can never get to a point where, there's something called artificial general intelligence, right? Whereby we envisage a future where AI is going to take over completely, right? And there's a lot of ethical discussions around it, debates, this and that and all. But I can tell you realistically where we're going to, right, without going into the politics of the ethics and everything, right? There is nothing more superior than the human brain, right? The human brain would, so think about these systems as elements that are going to coexist. A computer and a machine and run robot will continue to do what it is good at, which is doing repetitive tasks, never getting tired, and a human being is actually going to continue to do what they're good at, which is perception, decision making, stuff like that. So a combination of both, would actually yield us the future that we want, not an elimination of one, right?
Yeah.
So we're never going to get to a point where we will eliminate humans and substitute with them with robots. I can tell you, I can bet now. I can bet it's not going to happen. We will leverage robots because, for example, look at the dexterity of a human arm, right? How many times can you flip your hand the way you do and everything, right? A robot can do all of those things, but it can't do it the kind of dexterity that actually can do it now, because the human hand is a robotic arm in a way, save for the fact it is actually connected to your nervous system and everything, right? So that's why there's a branch called computational neuroscience, where they're actually starting to understand and computational neuroscience and biomimetics, whereby robotic systems are designed to mimic the human beings, and someone once, and sorry to bring this up, someone actually once said to me, in Africa, our biggest problem is that we spend so much time learning about locusts and everything and other thing and all, sensational as it may be, I'll tell you what, it is because it is actually by a South African engineer, right? That discovered something called swarm intelligence. Swarm intelligence is actually at the frontier of technology that is actually used in spacecraft, in space systems, NASA, and all of these complicated artificial intelligence algorithms are actually one way or the other, they have elements of swarm intelligence, right? And what swarm intelligence is informed by, it's actually informed with the bionics and the cohabitation of species like locusts, like how do locusts enable to move together in unison, so actually understanding their anatomy and physiology actually led to a discovery of a lot of AI systems. That's why you find these things twined into our curriculum. But here's the biggest mistake that we have. We look at these things in isolation and say, how is it going to help us? If you actually understand how a locust works, you'd actually understand how artificial intelligence works. I wish I had an hour to actually go in deeper into what that actually looks like, and how did we get there, and everything. But we could always do it some other time if there's an opportunity of that nature. But all I'm simply saying is we need to actually start understanding what things that we learn in the classroom are not just for the classroom. You need to marry them with your life. And how do you do that? Don't just do it to get good grades. I'll tell you right now, I mean, for me, good grades are not just the end of it. They're just a means through which I can say that, okay, you've got because for me, just good grades are not enough, in the sense that some of the things are, I know I've got a very photographic memory. Like, if I see something, I can be able to repeat it, but that doesn't amount to intelligence. Intelligence is having an open book exam, and acing that exam. You see? But if you ask me to recite, I'll recite and I'll give it to you. But give me an open book exam. That's where you can actually test me if I'm really, really applying my mind on what I've learned and into all of this. Well, we can go on and on, but yeah.
Yeah, we really can go on and on. I wish we had more time, but I think we've done a little bit of justice in an hour, because the whole idea of this conversation was to plant that seed, to just start that conversation, because I also needed to understand a lot of things about artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and all of that, because I think I've always seen it as something very far-fetched, to which it is not, clearly, after listening to you. And I think we perhaps can leave it here for now. But before I let you go, I do need you to tell us what inspires you, and how professionals like you give back. And if you can do this within literally like just 2 minutes.
Yeah, look, I think for me, it has always been hunger. Hey, I've always been hungry through my life. I think there's that determination that it has always been born out of a curiosity. I've always been a curious young person. I remember being beaten up several times growing up because I've misbehaved. A lot of parents would beat up a child because they're misbehaving, because they're stripping things out, but failing to understand that you could actually step back and say, why are they stripping that thing out? I remember I took out my brother's Walkman. You remember those things called Walkman? I took out a Walkman. I took out the motor out of that, took that motor. I made, when we were growing up with this thing called Ismodazama wire, like you make a motor. So my car actually used to have that motor, So from a very early age, I've always been very much curious, And I think for me, what really contributes a lot of it is just hunger and being resilient, and wanting more for myself, and stopping. I've stopped feeling sorry for myself and for my background. I had a mother who loved me so dearly, and I never wanted to let them down. And I have a very strong network of brothers and sisters who really love me so much. And I think for me, in as much as at times it's a disadvantage, is they always look up to me. They always looked up to me. So I just couldn't afford to fail them, and that in and of itself always keeps me fueled up, in terms of wanting to do more for myself and everything. But most importantly, I think as young people, let's meet as friends more often to discuss these business ideas. You'll be shocked that at some point along the way, you're going to break even, You're going to break even, and you're going to find yourself building the next big thing. I believe that in Africa, we've got capacity to build the next big technology service that the world can consume. Look at your app now. Your phone now is all the apps, 90% of them, if not all, are actually coming from Europe, America, China. How many of the apps that you're actually using now that are actually from Africa? Yeah. So things like that really always get me. So those are the things that really keep me worried. I mean, if you look at statistically 2018, the GDP of California only, the state of California, right, was 2.8 trillion. The GDP of Africa was 2.1 trillion. How could a nation or a place with 2.2 billion, be outsmarted by a place with 39 million people? It was technology, That's where the birth of Silicon Valley actually changes the dynamics of the whole thing. And AI and its capabilities, he has got enough room to actually help us to build the next big thing, because we're no longer starting from scratch. Because our biggest hindrance was that we needed to start everything from scratch. Now we're no longer starting from scratch. We've got a base, which is the infrastructure and the knowledge that we actually have. Let's leverage up all of those things, and let's build the next big thing as young Africans.
Yep. Let's build the next big thing as young Africans. I'm definitely for that. Even if it's not in the tech space, I think there's a lot of room for us to influence the African market in a futuristic way. And I'm all for that. I think we're more than capacitated really to be able to take Africa to the next level. The US doesn't need to do this for us. We can do this. Dr. Nkomo, I really don't want to end this, but thank you so much. We appreciate the time. We really do. And I think for the benefit of people who will try and upload this on YouTube and say as much as possible. I do feel that people can get one or two learnings from it. Maybe we'll do it again soon and go a little deeper into the technical stuff, but I think we're good.
Thank you so much, big sis. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm sure I could be doing other things and all, but I really appreciate the nod and the time spent.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Enjoy
it.
the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. Bye.